For 11 years, he mopped a hospital hallway no one entered. No one knew his name. No one asked why he only cleaned Section 7. Until one night, he saved a life in less than 4 minutes and opened a steel door that shouldn't have existed. What they found inside rewrote history. This isn't just about a janitor. It's about the man who guarded a promise.
Welcome to T&M Incredible Story. Let's uncover what really happened.
At St. Gregory Medical Center in Houston, the night shift had a rhythm all its own. The fluorescent lights buzzed in empty corridors. Carts squeaked across waxed floors, and the distant hum of machines kept vigil in ICU rooms like mechanical heartbeats. And always, somewhere in that quiet night, Frank Marris appeared. No one ever saw him arrive. He never clocked in, never parked in staff lots, and never said much beyond a polite nod or a quiet evening. But every nurse, resident, and security guard knew who he was. The janitor with the stiff gait and the silver stubble. The one who wore the same faded blue jumpsuit and carried an old leather key ring that clinked with 100 secrets. The man who spent his nights in Section 7, a part of the hospital that had been closed for almost a decade. They called him Old Ghost, not out of disrespect, but because somehow he just didn't feel entirely real. Section 7 was a sealed wing. A fire 10 years ago had left its walls scorched and its ceilings warped. Most of the staff had never set foot in it. But Frank did. Every night, without fail, he went in. And for 90 minutes, lights flickered back on in that abandoned corridor. Not one of the security cameras worked there. They cut out the second he opened the door. Not once had anyone seen what he did inside. Some said he was senile. Others said he was just stubborn. A few whispered stories about the fire, about a hidden unit, about something that happened and was never fully explained. But no one questioned him directly. Why would they? He did no harm. He asked for nothing. He cleaned what no one else would even look at. And when asked, Frank would only say, "I made a promise." This place mattered. It was Maria Lopez, a second-year trauma nurse, who first began to wonder. She passed him in the halls every night on her way to the lower ICU. He always nodded, always looked right into her eyes, like he knew her better than he should. She thought he might have been a veteran. Something about the way he moved, measured, alert, like a man who'd once learned to look for IEDs on country roads. One night, curious, she asked the desk manager, "Is Frank new?" The clerk blinked. "Frank who?" "The janitor, old guy. Section 7. The clerk frowned and began typing, then paused. "There's no janitor assigned to Section 7, she said slowly. "No one named Frank Marris on staff either." Maria stared at her. "Maybe you should check the old payroll." The clerk shook her head. "Even if he was here a decade ago, we wouldn't be letting him in now. That wing's not even on the regular access list." Maria walked back to her station in silence. And that night when she passed Section 7, she paused. The door was closed. No light seeped from beneath it, but just faintly. She thought she heard it, the sound of a mop bucket rolling across tile. Maria Lopez wasn't a reckless person. She had grown up in a household where rules were sacred, where doors marked "Do Not Enter" stayed shut, and where respect for elders was woven into every breath. But something about Frank Marris gnawed at her. It wasn't just curiosity, it was instinct. The same instinct that made her feel a patient's vitals before a monitor could beep. Something about Frank didn't add up, and tonight she was going to find out why. It was just after 2 a.m. when Maria left her floor, quietly crossing into the back stairwell. She'd timed it. Frank always entered Section 7 at 1:57, like clockwork. The corridor to Section 7 had been stripped of most equipment years ago. The paint peeled. Emergency lights flickered with static unease. At the far end, the heavy double doors marked Section 7 Restricted stood sealed, or at least they were supposed to be. As Maria rounded the final corner, she saw something that made her stop cold. The doors were open, just slightly, but enough to reveal a strip of warm yellow light inside. Not harsh, not flickering, a soft, living glow that didn't belong to a burned-out wing. And there, rolling silently into the darkness beyond, was the edge of Frank's mop bucket. Maria exhaled. Her hand rested on the doorframe as she peered in. What she saw stunned her. Section 7 was immaculate. The walls had been repainted, the floors scrubbed to a polished sheen. Old furniture had been repaired and repositioned exactly as if the wing had never closed. Photographs hung neatly in glass frames. Medical equipment, long considered decommissioned, stood, covered in plastic but organized. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and bleach. It was as if someone had turned back time. In the middle of the corridor, Frank knelt on one knee, wiping the baseboard with a white cloth, like he was cleaning a grave. He hadn't seen her. Maria stepped forward, careful not to make a sound. And that's when it happened. A loud metallic snap. The floor beneath her gave way. Maria screamed as she plunged through the grate, landing hard on a steel platform below. Darkness swallowed her. She gasped, her elbow throbbing in pain. Her flashlight had slipped out of her pocket and now blinked weakly beside her. She was in some kind of maintenance shaft, but this was no ordinary sub-basement. Old filing cabinets lined the walls, maps, diagrams, diodes blinking on disconnected servers. And across from her, faintly, illuminated, stood a sealed steel door with a biometric pad. She tried to call out, "Frank, help!" Silence. Then footsteps above. A shape moved in the shadows. Then a rope dropped beside her, tied with a perfect climber's knot. Frank appeared at the opening. "You all right?" he called down. "I think so." "What is this place?" There was no hesitation. Frank descended like a man 30 years younger, landing beside her with precise footing. He checked her pupils, her pulse, then glanced around the room. His jaw clenched. "You weren't supposed to see this," he murmured. "What is it?" Maria asked. "This isn't on any hospital floor plan." Frank sighed, standing slowly. "This is where secrets come to collect dust, and where promises refuse to die." He walked over to the steel door, placed his hand on the biometric pad, and to Maria's shock, the screen lit up green. "Access granted. Welcome back, LT Marris." The door hissed open. Behind it was the truth. The door opened with a mechanical sigh, and what lay beyond didn't belong beneath a hospital. It was like walking into a secret museum, except everything inside was classified, personal, and untouched by time. The air was cooler, dry, preserved. Inside the room were rows of metal storage lockers, all marked with military codes, confidential seals, and tags labeled Operation Shadow Light 2012. Frank Marris walked in without hesitation. His steps were slow, deliberate, like a man returning to the heart of a memory he never stopped living. Maria remained frozen in the doorway. "What is this place?" Frank looked at her, eyes as calm as ever, but something in his face cracked. "This is where they brought us back." "Brought who back?" He walked over to a large glass case in the center of the room and wiped the dust off with his sleeve. Inside was a framed photograph, faded but intact. 12 people stood in desert fatigues, sunburnt and smiling. They were standing in front of a military medical tent. A red cross flapped behind them. Frank tapped the glass. "That's us. Team Shadow Light, Covert Unit, Syria, 2012. Maria leaned in. "Wait! That's a combat field hospital, right?" He nodded. Doctors, medics, one special agent, one embedded surgeon. He paused. "My wife." Maria turned to him, stunned. "Your wife?" Frank pointed to the woman standing front and center in the photo. A tall, dark-haired figure with a stethoscope around, her neck and a rifle slung over one shoulder. Her name patch read Dr. Evelyn Marris. She ran the field team, saved dozens of lives during that mission. We were ambushed on the final day. 11 of us made it out. She didn't. Maria walked slowly through the room, taking in the sealed crates, the documents, the surgical equipment wrapped in vacuum packs. "I don't understand. Why is all this here? Why didn't anyone ever talk about it?" Frank looked around with the quiet of someone who had lived the answer for years. They couldn't. The operation was buried. Politically inconvenient. Wrong place, wrong time. Officially, we were never there. Which meant no ceremony, no flags, no closure. He paused, his voice lowering. "When they brought us home, Evelyn was already fading. She died in Section 7, in that very hallway above us." Maria swallowed hard. The air felt heavier now. "And you stayed?" "As a janitor?" Frank chuckled softly. They offered me early retirement, a pension, a chance to disappear somewhere with sunshine and guilt. But I made her a promise. I told her I'd never let Section 7 rot. I'd keep it clean, keep it ready, because it was the last place she breathed. He walked to a small table in the corner, pulled open a drawer. Inside was a small leather-bound book. He handed it to Maria. She opened it and gasped. Inside were handwritten names, dozens of them, dates, locations, tributes, little notes written in different styles. They're all from your team, she asked. Those who survived, those who visited, those who couldn't live with the silence. They left pieces of themselves here. Suddenly a loud thud echoed through the chamber. Maria jumped. Frank's eyes sharpened. Someone's coming. He closed the drawer, stepped back and shut off the room lights with one switch. Don't say anything yet, he whispered. Not until you know what's coming. They waited in the shadows as the steel dukkha slowly sealed itself again, hiding once more the room that shouldn't exist. And somewhere above them, Section 7 flickered back to silence. By the time Maria Lopez climbed back up to the surface level of Section 7, her pulse was still racing. Her mind reeled from what she had seen, an entire classified operation buried beneath the hospital, the truth behind a ghost, and the quiet man who had kept his promise while the world forgot. But what unsettled her more was the sound they heard just before leaving. Footsteps, heavy, coordinated, and not hospital issue. Who else knows about this? She had asked Frank. He didn't answer. He only said, if they're back, you need to be careful. 2 nights later, Maria stayed late after shift, lingering in the hospital cafeteria with a laptop and a restless sense of duty. She needed answers, more than Frank could give. She searched every military archive she could access, digging into Operation Shadowlight. As expected, nothing. No official mention, no deployment logs. The team didn't exist. But in a forgotten forum for ex-military medics, she found a single thread from years ago, looking for any survivors from Raqqa evac. 2012, I never forgot the man who carried 3 of us across that courtyard. They said he died, but I swear he walked back into the fire. If you're out there, thank you. It was signed J.W. 3rd Marine Expeditionary. Maria scrolled to the last comment. I think he's alive. Houston, Section 7. Her fingers froze. Suddenly, the power flickered. Her laptop screen went black, then rebooted, but not to the home screen. A message appeared in green text over a black background. Stop digging. Later that night, Maria returned to Section 7, this time with someone else. Isaiah Bell, a security officer and Marine vet himself, had noticed the pattern in the building's access logs. You know there's no record of Frank opening doors, he said. But every night, like clockwork, Section 7 powers up for 90 minutes, as if the system just allows it. She told him everything. Instead of laughing or walking away, Isaiah grew solemn. We had guys like him, he said. Vets who lost more than limbs. They disappear on purpose. So they waited outside Section 7, hidden in the shadows. And at 1:57 a.m., right on schedule, the double doors opened. But Frank didn't step through this time. 2 men in black suits did. They wore ID badges that flashed too quickly to read. Their shoes made no sound. One carried a case the size of a portable defibrillator. The other whispered into a mic on his wrist. Maria looked at Isaiah. He nodded once, battle ready. They followed the men inside, careful not to make a sound. But Section 7 was empty. No Frank, no light, no sign of use. Only the door at the far end, leading to the old elevator shaft, was ajar. Maria whispered, they're trying to find the room. Isaiah pulled out his phone and started recording. Then one of the men spoke aloud as if addressing the walls. Agent Marris, if you're still alive, this is your only warning. Shut it down. You were deactivated a long time ago. Ghost Protocol is in effect. Maria flinched. What's Ghost Protocol? Isaiah replied quietly, it means terminate all traces. They were going to erase him. Suddenly, all the lights in Section 7 cut out. A second later, a low rumble came from the walls. From behind them, Frank's voice rang out from the darkness. You came to bury the past again, but I've kept it cleaner than you ever could. A blinding flash, emergency backup lights flooded the corridor. Frank stood at the far end, tall and steady, holding a long object in his arms. It wasn't a weapon. It was a folded American flag. The two men froze. One instinctively reached for his waist. Isaiah stepped between them. "Don't," he warned. "You're not the only one trained for this." Maria's voice cracked through the moment. "Why now, Frank? Why are they coming back?" Frank stepped forward, his eyes not angry but resolute. "Because memory is dangerous, and someone's afraid I remember too much." That night the truth was no longer buried, and the war Frank thought he'd left behind had just found him again. By dawn, the two agents were gone. They didn't resist. Isaiah escorted them out of Section 7, with the silent authority of a man who'd once led patrols through enemy corridors. Maria followed close behind, heart pounding, phone clenched in her pocket, still recording. Frank stayed behind, in the corridor, alone, staring at the flag in his hands. He didn't say a word, not until 6:45 a.m., when the hospital started to stir, and the first nurses passed through the lower hallways like ghosts clocking in for another day. Maria returned to him quietly. "You said memory is dangerous," she whispered. "What are they afraid of?" Frank finally looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, he looked tired. Not physically, but like someone who had held the dam for too long and now felt the cracks forming. He reached into his jumpsuit and pulled out a small key on a worn cord. It didn't look like much. Brass, half tarnished, but when he handed it to her it felt heavier than steel. "Come," he said. Beneath the sealed steel door of the hidden sub-basement, Maria opened the storage cabinet Frank had once guarded so fiercely. Behind a false panel sat a locked briefcase, nearly invisible against the wall shadows. She inserted the key. It clicked open. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, all handwritten, some water damage, some sealed with wax. Each one bore the name of a fallen member of Operation Shadowlight. Next to them sat a hard drive labeled in red ink. "The promise files. If I die, tell them who we were." Maria's breath caught. "Are these testimonies?" she asked. Frank nodded slowly. "Each of us made a tape, a letter, a confession. We knew the mission would never exist officially, but we didn't want our stories to vanish. So we recorded them and made a pact." "What kind of pact?" Frank met her eyes. If even one of us survived, he would carry the rest forward. Maria felt her throat tighten. "And you're the last one," she whispered. Frank nodded. "The others? They didn't make it. One by one they were erased. Not killed, just unmade. Files deleted, records purged. No funerals, no medals, no graves. Just silence." He closed the briefcase gently. "I stayed here to protect this. Not because I'm brave, but because someone had to remember. Someone had to tell the truth." Later that night, Maria watched the first video from the hard drive. The screen flickered, then stabilized. A young man, mid-30s, desert camouflage, sat against a tent pole. Dust covered his cheeks. His voice trembled. "My name is Corporal Tyler Reese. If you're seeing this, it means the mission never made the news. We were sent to rescue hostages. We found more than that. We found corruption, black market weapons, civilians caught in crossfire. We weren't supposed to survive, but we did because of one man, Marris. He didn't follow orders. He followed people. He carried me when I couldn't walk. He carried others when we were dead weight. He carried hope." The video cut off. Maria sat frozen. This wasn't just military history. This was human history, and someone had tried to bury it under a hospital floor. Across the city, in a federal building with no public name, two men reviewed the footage from the previous night. One of them turned to the other. "She knows now," he said flatly. The other man closed the folder in front of him. "Let her know," he replied. "The world could use another truth it won't believe." At St. Gregory's, the hallway outside Section 7 was strangely quiet. Maria stood at the threshold, watching as Frank, dressed now not in a janitor's jumpsuit, but a dark suit with a silver tie, gently placed the final envelope inside the briefcase. She asked softly, "What now?" Frank looked out toward the hallway, where his wife had once drawn her last breath. Then he said, "Now I stop cleaning and start remembering out loud." 4 weeks later, Section 7 was unrecognizable, no longer abandoned, no longer hidden, no longer haunted by silence. Instead, it had been restored, not just as a wing of St. Gregory Medical Center, but as a place of living memory. Polished marble replaced scorched tile, glass panels now lined the corridor walls, each one engraved with the names of the 12 members of Operation Shadowlight, including the civilians they saved. And at the center of the wing stood a memorial alcove, its floor inlaid with a compass rose, pointing always toward the east, towards Syria. Above it, etched into black glass, glowed a simple dedication, in memory of Dr. Evelyn Marris, physician, peacemaker, last to leave. She stayed, so they could live. At the base of the memorial was a sealed capsule containing the promise files, a permanent record, unclassified, open to the public and protected. By order of the Department of Defense, the capsule would remain untouched unless any attempt was made to erase history again. But no one ever came to take it, because the story had already spread. News outlets across the country ran the headline, "The Janitor Who Wasn't." Subreddits filled with tributes. Veterans left comments like prayers. A viral video of Frank's standoff in Section 7 became a symbol, not of scandal, but of remembrance. Students wrote essays. A congressman called for a special commendation, but Frank refused medals. He asked for one thing only, that the hallway remain open to the public, and that no cleaning staff be assigned to it. "I'll take care of it," he said. "I know where the memories live." Every Monday at 7 a.m., Frank came back, no longer wearing janitor blues, now in a pressed blazer, a pocket square, and a single white rose in hand. He no longer carried a mop, only a polishing cloth, which he used to gently wipe the glass above Evelyn's name. Then he sat in the alcove, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours. People passed by, some stopped, some sat with him in silence, and over time it became something more than a room. It became a ritual, a place where nurses paused their steps, where young soldiers left coins, where patients whispered names they hadn't spoken in years. It became what Evelyn asked for in the last letter she wrote. "If I don't make it, don't bury me. Just make a place where my name can breathe. A place for someone to come sit. And remember that people mattered." On spring morning, a boy of about 10 walked into the alcove with his grandfather, a Marine who'd served long before. Shadowlight. They saw Frank sitting there, quiet, calm. The boy approached, nervous. "Sir," he said, "were you in a war?" Frank looked down at him with a soft smile. "I was in a promise." "Did you win?" Frank paused, then said, "I lost the person I love most, but I kept the promise. So maybe that's how I won." The boy nodded solemnly, then reached into his pocket and placed a small action figure, a plastic soldier at the base of the glass wall. "For her?" he said. Frank didn't speak. He didn't need to. And as the light through the hospital windows warmed the glass, the rose, and the names on the wall, a nurse passing by whispered what many had come to believe. He wasn't cleaning that hallway all those years. He was guarding it, guarding her, guarding all of us. Final caption for video, book, story trailer. Some fight wars. Others fight silence. But the greatest fight is to keep a name alive. This was his battlefield, and he never surrendered.